Hey, y'all, welcome back to the Tanner Farmstead podcast. I've got Sean with Mindful Farmer with me today. Really excited to have him on. And so we're going to hear a little bit of his story and just get to ask him a lot of questions about gardening, homesteading, and farming. So, Sean, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Tell us a little bit about just kind of where you're located and just how long have you been growing?
Yeah. So I'm located just down the road from you. We're not too far away. I've been growing. Gosh, first garden was probably like 15 years ago, in high school, going into college, and then got married 13, 14 years ago, and I just went nuts. I went off the deep end into gardening. I was studying environmental science, and it felt like all the things I was learning about was putting a Band-Aid on a lot of the issues that could be addressed if we just did agriculture and more sustainably. So I started researching sustainable ag and looked for farming jobs and couldn't find anything. So I kept doing environmental consulting and ecology, which wound up being good in that ecology prepared me to do sustainable farming, and I think in a more scientific or applied way. And yeah, my wife studied nutrition, and she was studying holistic nutrition. I was studying kind of holistic approach to agriculture. We were converging in the same avenue. And so early on in our marriage, we're like farming, we're going to do sustainable farming. And it was years before we got the opportunity to really practice that. We're just learning. I started a beekeeping business in Houston, Texas, where we were living at the time, and was beekeeping on rooftops and stuff like that. And then any spare moment I had, I was going to farms and learning as much as I could from other farmers, doing sheep and pigs and citrus and other beekeepers, and just trying to like soak it all in that I possibly could, while I grew our business, which was called Mindful Honey. So that's kind of where Mindful Farmer came from.
This was so you're in Texas. So this is still, yeah. And are y'all both from Texas?
Yeah, we're both from South Texas.
Okay, nice.
Or like coastal Texas. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're recent Arkansas transplants. I say recent, it's probably like 7 years now. It feels recent. Anywho's, yeah, we're learning the agricultural side of things, still working as an ecologist, and then we've grown the beekeeping business to where we wanted it. It's like a nice little side hustle. And then I found an opportunity to move here to Arkansas to work for Heifer International.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was doing some of their farm consulting, business consulting for area farmers. And really, I feel like they took a chance on me because I didn't on paper look like a professional farmer, but I've been in it and like learning from other farms as much as I could, and then running our own, ag business. But it was just an amazing experience. Like the first year was like traveling around to 30 different farmers across Arkansas that had been growing for years, and just learning how people were farming 30 different ways. And so it was like the best, immersive experience I could have ever asked for, to see how all these growers were doing it so differently, and take basically the things I liked from each grower and some things that maybe I didn't like, and like, don't do those things. And then after that first year, I got the opportunity to start a farm basically almost from scratch at Heifer Ranch, and ran a production certified organic market garden. So I got to take everything I learned from that first year and from these other farmers, and then implement it into the production side. And so, yeah, we're doing 4 acres of certified organic vegetables, and we were selling wholesale across the state from Memphis to Northwest Arkansas. And that was like really just a fantastic experience to, learn and experiment and trial things. Like, because I was growing for this nonprofit, I had more freedom to experiment with stuff that other growers were interested in, see how it worked, and then share that to the other growers. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we all kind of collectively, my motion sensor light turned off. Is the lighting okay? I may just.
Oh yeah, you're good. The lighting's great. Okay. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it off. So just an opportunity to learn. And then I know this is a long story.
No, this is what I want to hear. So this is great.
Yeah. And so I am like deeply passionate about Arkansas agriculture in particular, even though I'm a Texas transplant. We moved here, the intentions of moving back to Texas, and now we're trying to get our family in Texas to move up with us. We love it. Like people are awesome. It's a beautiful state, and there's just so much potential too on the ag sector um, to help build sustainable food systems. We need a lot of work in that sector, but there's a lot of potential. And so I'm really passionate about seeing other producers flourish, because I think when the local farms flourish, the local communities flourish. And there's so much evidence for that, like healthier communities, less crime, like better education, like all ships rise whenever local food systems are sustainable and thriving. And so yeah, that's a big passion that we have. And so yeah, Arkansas has a big potential. Like we've got a lot of ag land, though a lot of it is in conventional commodity crops.
Yeah.
There's a lot of knowledge in that ag sector that if we can kind of channel it towards specialty crop, which is like all the vegetables or cut flowers, and especially organic, like, man, I mean, we could bring in billions of additional revenue from existing farmland. So that gets me super excited. And when I was at Heifer, I left during COVID, and yeah, just kind of a feeling that I really wanted to accomplish some other things and how I could help farmers and what I was seeing that farmers needed. And for Arkansas growers, there was a big need for tunnels. Most of our high tunnels come from out of state, so that adds a lot of expense. So we're manufacturing high tunnels was kind of how it kicked off. And then during that 6-year period at Heifer where I'm running the farm, I basically had like a notebook of all the tools I felt could be improved upon. Or I'd go through the seed catalogs and I'd look through all the tool sections, and everyone in the market gardening world's like a real tool junkie. And I would just like, that's not a great design, or this is just kind of redundant, or what is like the bare minimum like tools that are multifunctional, would last forever, that a market gardener would need to either start growing like in their backyard garden, and then even if they scale to 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acres, they're still using the same tools. So that's also kind of an approach I had. Was trying to figure out how do I help home gardeners grow more like market farmers, because they're going to get more out of their space with less time and effort too, which benefits the market gardener. And our future farmers come from gardeners, right? Like we're talking about the next generation of farmers, like they've got to enjoy gardening and then be able to scale it and see, that they can make a livelihood at it.
100%. I feel like that's the way a lot of people start, is, which I think is a good place to start. Like if you have
Oh yeah,
if you're like, oh, do I want to, start a urban farm or a larger market garden? It's like, have you grown a garden before? Maybe that's a starting point. And I
yeah,
feel like that's where most people start, and
yeah,
it's a great starting point. There's no
yeah.
risk in it really, other than just
Mhm.
some initial startup. So
Yeah.
um,
And if you can make that gardening process easier for folks, then the idea of them scaling it to a full-time occupation makes a lot more sense to them. Whereas like if their concept or like experience for gardening has been like, oh yeah, I remember gardening. I just pulled weeds all summer, or like it was brutal. Then they're not going to be very inclined to like become a market gardener. But if they're like, we figured out a system, it was 10 minutes a day, we had more produce that we could use, like, then you're like, oh, now I can really see scaling this up to 1 acre, 2 acres, 3 acres. And so yeah, that's what I'm hoping to kind of inspire amongst home gardeners
yeah,
with mindful.
yeah. And I love,
Um,
like, which I don't have your broad fork, but like I think the broad fork I have is it Meadow Creature? Is that the brand?
yeah.
It's the name of the brand. But what I love, the reason I bought the broad fork, I think this is before you had yours, or before you had designed yours, or at least that I knew about that you had designed yours. The big, I don't want wooden handles. Like I don't want crap that's gonna break. Like I want this thing to be freaking sturdy, which is why I bought that one. But what I don't like about it is it's not your standard market garden bed width of 30 inches or close to it.
Yeah.
You basically got to do 2 sets in one spot with that same broad fork. Um, so it's twice the amount of work.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are some of the things, like I was talking about that notebook that I had. I knew the broad fork, and I got to invent some new tools with heifer, which was pretty cool. We did like a root crop washer, a couple other things.
I think I've saw that on YouTube. I need
Yeah.
to build one of those because
Oh heck, it was a game changer for us. We were doing like 12 to 16,000 pounds of root crops a year, and we were doing it by hand. And
oh
so
my
it was like,
gosh,
we need to figure out a better way to do this.
yeah,
So yeah, that was a big step forward for us. But I knew I wanted to do a different design for the broad fork, because we had the wooden handles and they snapped, or the tines would bend.
yep,
And then the meadow creature was one that I got, and it's a great broad fork. But for a lot of our apprentices that we had at the ranch, most of them were young and female, and they struggled with the heavier weight of an all steel giant broad fork.
yep,
And so, or even just not, even if they, were lifting it and broad fork, they didn't have the body mass to like pull that over. And so that was where I designed the finesse broad fork. So it fits that standardized bed of 30 inches. You can use it as a rake and a bed marker. So it replaces several other tools.
mm-hmm.
And it basically pulls the power and the leverage from your hips versus your shoulders. So yeah, I feel like having a better tool too, like we were talking about, things that would help motivate a gardener to become a market gardener, a market farmer. If it's a brutal task of broad forking and it just feels insurmountable, then the idea of moving up to an acre of it seems crazy. But if you have a good tool that's multifunctional, lasts a long time, and makes the work a lot easier and ergonomic, then adding more acreage seems a lot more approachable.
Yeah, 100%. When did you get converted over to soil blocks?
Oh man, I have my original soil blocker that I bought when we first got married.
Okay.
And like I take that one to like conferences and stuff, and I'm like this is how long these things last.
Yeah, they are. I've got one. I don't soil block a whole lot, but I have one.
Yeah.
So have you always done soil blocks, or did you at one point go from trays to soil blocks?
Yeah, I did. I'd always done soil blocks
Okay.
for the. I mean, except for when I was a lot younger and didn't even know about them. But pretty soon after gardening, I went to soil blocks. When I started managing the farm, I went to trays and then went back to soil blocks.
Yeah.
Soil blocks, I felt like we got a way healthier plant. We were soil blocking, we go all the way up to the larger size for like our heirloom tomatoes at the farm I was managing. And so we were able to get double liter, 18-inch tall, super sturdy tomatoes in this like soil block. It's only, 4 by 4 by 4, that we could transplant and then have like tomatoes in 6 weeks. And cucumbers, we were getting cucumber harvest within 3 weeks of transplant. So it was nuts. And so the soil blocks really help benefit the plant a ton. The thing that everyone when they see it, they're like, that looks like a ton of work. Making the blocks and seeding the blocks. And so I had to like solve those problems before I could go back to it from the trays we were using. And so one of those things is just like, once you scale up, you can get the standing soil blocker. Then you can fill up the tray really quickly. And I really, really like that tool. And then, and then also realizing that like, it is more labor to make the block. But what I found is like, we were saving labor in transplant because we weren't hauling around a bunch of trays, or, I was using basically apprentices that were learning how to farm alongside me and trying to help them move quickly. If they had to like pull, like, crunch cells and pull stuff out, it was going to take all day. And
especially like the 1 year that like the thin flimsy plastic trays.
Yeah.
I hate those.
Those are terrible.
I mean, I use the wind strip, the never see wind strip trays, and it's like after you go from having a good tray, like if you are going to use plastic trays, like once you've used the cheap crap and then you go to like a nice tray, it's just like, oh, this is so much better. But I know what you're talking about. Of like, I feel like farmers that go to soil blocks, most of them I feel like fall in love with it. They're like, I'm never going back.
Yeah.
It
really is like I like that I can, like, I'll use the standing 35. So I got 35 cabbage plants, and at a time, and I can pick them all up and just hold them on my arm and then walk and just, take the brick. Transplanting becomes quicker.
Yeah.
And so where it does take more labor on the making the block side, it saves you labor on the planting side, I found.
Yeah.
And then the seeding was another issue too. So there's like drop seeders, gravity seeders, whatever you want to call them. And there weren't any for soil blocks. And so I started thinking about a design for one, and then I made one. Because the little blocks, we were starting 1,000 heads of lettuce every single week. And we're doing that by hand, like seeding the little soil blocks. And so we had to find a much faster way to do that, and to be more accurate too, since, one of the other hindrances to people scaling their farms is they have to hire labor, and that labor takes time to train. So making it as easy for them as possible to not double seed, seed consistently. The drop seeder really made a big difference. And so, yeah, that was like a big step forward for us, was having that drop seeder. And I'd initially just invented that for like my own use at the ranch, and then was able to, like when I started Mindful Farmer, take that, and we've commercialized it. And now we're even working on drop seeders for other companies that have different types of like wind strip trays and paper pot system and stuff like that. So what's different about ours is it uses neodymium magnets as both a spring and an interchangeable plate system. So there's basically no moving parts except for the actual one plate.
Yeah.
And then also cut down the cost. So they're the cheapest drop seeder on the market, because it doesn't have a bunch of other components. So that was kind of our approach to it.
Yeah, the ones you buy, I mean, they can get pricey. It's yeah, but it does. I mean, like you're saying, it saves you a lot of time, especially if you're using the the pelleted seed. You can drop it in there and just rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
What is the just from your experience, what do you feel like is the biggest challenge that like small scale growers face? Like, and I'm asking probably more on the actual market gardening side.
Yeah.
Of people that are actually, commercially grown food to sell and feed their community.
Yeah. Apart from land access, I mean, that's the big one. Like we don't have any family in the state. We don't have any family land. So like being able to find the land for our someday farm that we're saving up for is a challenge in and of itself. The next step, though, if a farmer can get land, is capital.
Yeah.
And that's a huge issue. Even working with organizations like the Farm Service Agency, an FSA loan, a lot of times they don't really understand market gardening and what it looks like. Or you go to fill out that form and it's like, how many crops do you grow? And it gives you 3 options, and you're like, 30, like, so even the forms aren't set up for specialty crop. So that's been kind of interesting. I've tried to navigate that process before and ran into some headaches with trying to go through the FSA loan process, that they really just don't get small scale sustainable agriculture. Most of who they're dealing with is like large cattle or chicken operations, or like rice or corn in the Delta. Yeah. So that's the next step, is capital. And then the next one I found is a biggest challenge for existing market gardeners is labor. And it seems like there's this kind of no man's land of a lot of market gardeners will be like them and their spouse and a couple of part-time folks, or like, high school kids that can help out intermittently.
Yeah.
And they're like on 5 acres or less. And then you jump up to like 40 acres plus, and they have a team of people, or you go beyond, 100 acres plus, and they have like H-2A visa workers. Yeah. And there's like no one from like very, very few farmers who have, 4, 5, 6 full-time staff members, and very few people from 5 acres to 40 acres. And that's the biggest reason, because in Arkansas, like, once you have 3 employees, you have to have, workers' comp. Like there's all these things all of a sudden get triggered once it's
Yeah.
more than just you, your spouse, and one other person. And then all of a sudden your overhead goes up. And so you need higher insurance and all these other things. And then you all of a sudden have to be a lot bigger farm. And so one of like the dreams I have, the puzzle I want to crack is to figure out how to make that middle size farm work. How do you do wholesale in a mid-scale farm or upper small scale farm, however we describe small scale, and make it work and be profitable and like actually provide like a livable wage for folks, you know?
Yeah, I feel like that's the hard part of like how do you make it to where it's like you could hire full-time staff and it'd be like a decent, like, again, it's
Yeah.
you're not paying them minimum wage, like you know, they're on salary, they're getting I mean they're getting paid fairly well.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's tough. But yeah, I mean
It's-
I'm with you. I mean, I feel like a lot of, you know, small scale, when I say small scale, like under an acre, you know, you can pull it off with some part-time, you know, high school kids or college kids,
yeah.
whatever, which works, you know,
Mhm.
it's doable. And but yeah, I'd imagine as you continue to scale up, the complexities grow pretty immensely.
Yeah.
And then of course, like you said, finding land. I mean, I don't when I first asked that question, it's, you know, because we bought the place we're on now, we bought like just as like we're just gonna homestead and garden and stuff. So I always forget. I'm like, oh yeah, like most people need to find a piece of land first, um,
Mhm.
and which, as we know, the prices of real estate is very expensive, especially with acreage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's kind of been the catch 22, the paradox of like the homesteading movement has been really good, but it's also incentivized or like motivated people to have a little bit of land. And so now like those, you know, a 10-acre plot that would be great for like a market gardener is now priced at a residential value as opposed to an agricultural value. And so that does present a challenge for sure. And then also too, like one of the things that I noticed was like it can be hard to find the right piece of land, and it could take like years to wait for it and years to build infrastructure. And so I'm even realizing that like this goal towards, you know, moving onto a farm might even be like a multi-generational thing. It might even be something I work towards that my kids get to enjoy the fruit of that. Um, but yeah, it can be so tough to like be willing to wait for the right piece of property too. That I'll sometimes see growers, you know, hey, we found 5 acres, it's in a good price, let's go for it. And it's like on the side of a hill, and they just spend the next 10 years like trying to fight the conditions of the property, and then they're not able to scale the farm the way they want to. And so sometimes it's worth waiting, even if it has to be years, for the right piece of property that's gonna, you know, make you succeed. And you know, other businesses do that too. Like if you're gonna open a gas station or something like that, like you've got to be on the road, like you got to be, you know, close to the traffic, and it might be worth waiting until a particular plot opens before you do that, versus doing it somewhere else and then struggling to get the traffic or the business you need.
yeah, I think that's something that's underlooked is like location, because I think as farmers, I would imagine most farmers like get into farming and gardening and all that because it's like they enjoy, you know, being connected to nature, being connected to the land. So I think with homesteading, farming, there is this fairy tale allure to it, and then I think as farmers, it's like, well, we want the beautiful piece of property that's 10 acres and has, you know, beautiful view, and it's just like at some point too, we got to come down like, okay, what's practical, and I may be better off. I may be better off on 2 acres
Mm-hmm.
in a much better location that's going to allow my business to thrive versus I'm on 10 acres, but I'm way out there.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, for sure.
if we were way out of town, like our farm, like us having our little farm store would be like, it probably wouldn't really work.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be worth it, at least financially, to have
Mhm.
invested in doing it. So that's a really good point. Um, very good point.
Yeah. Yeah. The land too, like, gosh, you know, that's such a big hindrance. And there are folks that are working on that. There's like some land trust organizations like up in Northwest Arkansas, you know, that are creating basically protected agricultural lands that they can lease to farmers. And that is a potential option, leasing land. I feel like that's something that is hard for small farmers, and I get that, because that's something we're even like looking at right now. Because, you know, the big guys, the big conventional guys do that all the time. They're always leasing and subleasing and sharecropping and all these sort of things. But for smaller folks, you know, if you took on land to lease, and like I've even had folks, you know, offer like land, like, oh, hey, we've got 1,000 acres. Like you want 5 acres, you can farm it.
Yeah.
But just to get that set up could take a season or two to cover crop, kill the grass. You know, I could easily put 10 grand in soil amendments and another 10, 20 grand in improvements. And then that landowner dies, change owners, sells, and like all that infrastructure, you know, including soil amendments, is like gone, lost. And I think that's a big hesitation to a lot of folks for leasing. And so it's really got to be like the right situation with the right leasee and the right leaseor, and for that to make work, for that to work. But that's a question too that I've been talking with some folks with Extension and NRCS and St. Joseph Center in Little Rock about, like, is there a way that someone could lease land, make a living, and be able to farm sustainably? And there's really just, unfortunately, at the moment, not a lot of folks to look to that have demonstrated that. So it's a tough puzzle to crack, and there's not a guidebook for it. Like, it's going to take some experimentation and figuring out. But hopefully, you know, if we can figure that out, then it can be a replicable model, and other folks can pick that up.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think it's pretty clear, there's a lot of hurdles, to say the least, that you've got to overcome. And that's just the start, you know, much less like just trying to get it going, trying to get yourselves, you know, building clientele, reinvesting in the business, you know. And I've made a fair amount of videos on it, because, and this is just from my perspective, and everybody has a different one. You know, when I first got into market gardening, of course, I think like the main guys that had made content or had written books, like JM, and then you had obviously Curtis Stone at the time, still, you know, doing the urban farming thing. And Curtis's books kind of, again, when I was reading him, it was probably 4 or 5 years after he wrote it. Maybe I read it a couple years after. I'm not really sure, but you know, he was just like, hey, bootstrap it, and he would kind of, and I love Curtis, he like with what he's done, but I just felt like sometimes people kind of made it out to be that, like, hey, it doesn't cost that much to get going, you just got to figure it out. And I think there's some truth to like the whole bootstrapping thing, but at the same time, like, man, like it just costs a lot of money. And I think that's probably one of the big barriers with market gardening, is just the amount of infrastructure. I mean, shoot, just like you said, you could have, depending on the size of your farm, like you could have $10,000 of compost, you know, and amendments, and that's it, just in the ground.
Yep.
That's not counting anything else. And it's just, I feel like that's a huge barrier, like you said, just the financial piece. Just, gosh, it costs a lot of money, and that's before we're even talking greenhouses and hoop houses. And I mean, oh my gosh, I mean, you could spend a lot.
Yeah, you can't. And two, that's I think the USDA is starting to see some of that. That infrastructure is a big limitation for small scale farmers. There's been a huge push by the USDA to, like, they're recognizing that, like, we're hemorrhaging small farms.
Yeah.
And also realizing that, you know, with instability across the world, like, small farms are what, like, continue to feed people whenever things go terribly wrong in the world. So, I mean, it's a national security issue to help small farms. So they're putting a lot of money towards it. But they're realizing, like, high tunnels and cold storage are two big things that cost a lot of money, that would dramatically help a farmer be able to scale. And so there are like grants available through that, through the NRCS has a bunch of high tunnels. And I got at least a dozen phone calls this week just with folks that have been awarded here in Arkansas, like the NRCS high tunnel grants.
Really?
But the high tunnels are a good example of like what you were saying with, you can bootstrap it, like you could do it with low tunnels, maybe you get a Caterpillar tunnel.
Yeah.
But whenever we looked at like we had Caterpillar tunnels out at Heifer Ranch, and we lost every single one to wind damage. Like at some point over the course of that 6 years, none of them made it. They definitely helped improve the crops, but like the bump that we got from just having high tunnels was so much bigger that on our future farm that we're planning on, that's immediately I'm going to cover an acre in high tunnels. Like and I'm not going to try and do anything until I can get to a place where I can do that, because the return on the investment it'll pay for itself in almost a year. Versus if I try and bootstrap it, then I'm fighting row cover on low tunnels. I'm fighting cat tunnels that have fallen apart.
Good.
And then, the more that you, especially if you're paying people to manage those things, you don't want to pay people to manage stuff. You want to pay them to harvest things. And so that was kind of like our big shift. We got the high tunnels, we put them up, and then the only thing folks are really doing in those high tunnels is pulling produce out of it. And so it was well worth the investment, even if it takes, even if it's a much bigger spend on the front end, it'll pay dividends. And that's a hard choice to make too. If you're trying to make it go at farming and having to carry another job potentially, and dropping a lot of money for a high tunnel or walk-in cooler tractor.
I feel like it's what it takes though. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I get like the idea of wanting to dive head first and just go full-time farming, but gosh, there's so much reinvestment that has to take place. Like not having another income stream to where it's like, okay, we can take all this profit and reinvest it, it really for several years.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just super helpful, but I agree with you 1,000%, man. Growing Undercover. And I want to cover our whole farm, like same thing. We don't have the capital right now to do it. And all we have is two, farmers friend cat tunnels, which work great. But it's hard for us. We can't really grow throughout the winter because, if we get 0-degree temps, like I can't really protect crops. I can in the Caterpillar tunnels, but like outside of it, nothing's going to survive in a little poly low tunnel when it's 0.
Yeah.
But obviously the investment side of that is it's steep. But you can crank out some crops in those things, man.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, if you're working in there, you have other people working in there. And it's raining, you need to harvest. You're out of the rain. You can control obviously the irrigation level of your crops. Yeah. It's just it's so nice.
Yeah. Well, and that was kind of the strategy. So at the ranch where I was managing the organic farm, I had like stipulations basically, like we're a nonprofit farm. We're trying to sell to Arkansas. We don't want to compete with other farmers. And so kind of the stipulations I had is like, I couldn't sell to other markets that other farmers were at, or I couldn't sell products other farmers had. So I had to figure out like what was there a need for that other folks weren't doing. My mission was to figure out how to do it profitably, and then share that to other farmers. And then I would figure out the next problem to solve kind of thing. So like wholesale root crops are a big one that we like tackled. And what we kind of wound up doing was like in the spring, we'd be out in the fields. We have 3 acres of outdoor growing space, and then our 3 high tunnels. And it was like spring, we were out in the fields. We had all of our root crops, brassicas, onions, and garlic. And then in the summer, we went into the high tunnels and we had all the tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, cucumbers. And like that wasn't just those 3 tunnels was enough to keep everyone busy because they're so productive. And then in the fall, we come back out of the tunnels into the fields for root crops, brassicas, lettuce. And then in the winter, we're back in the tunnels. And so like that became kind of our rhythm. And it worked wonderfully. Like it kept everyone busy every single week of the year with the same workload, because we were able to keep going. And if you're a for-profit farm, that helps you keep employees year to year if you can keep everyone busy through the winter. So then you're not having to retrain people every season. So that's another win. but yeah, in the summertime, it was almost like we wanted to be in the high tunnels because we put shade cloth on it, have it all opened up. And so you're not just standing out like in the blistering sun getting, trying to pick, squash or something. You're in the high tunnel and you got 50% shade over you as you're picking tomatoes. And it makes it a lot more enjoyable to be in there. And that was too, like, well, I saw the need for the high tunnels for growers. And unfortunately, like right now, I'm not at a place where I can make the largest size, which is what a lot of people are after, the 30 by 96s.
Yeah.
Bootstrapping my business and doing a lot of the pipe bending by hand. But we're doing the smaller size tunnels, and that's what I've kind of found is like people that are venturing into this and trying to see, are the high tunnels worth the effort? The small tunnels really can make a big difference in getting someone started. So like we started doing 14 feet wide to 20 feet wide, and it seems like folks that are making that jump from home gardener to market gardener, part-time market gardener, that's been like a sweet spot for them. So that's really kind of been my mission behind the more moderately sized tunnels is to help lower the barrier to entry, versus a 30 by 96 can be like super daunting to someone who's just getting started.
Well, I mean, I think the beauty of it too is like I think that sometimes people, and you're an example of this, is I think sometimes people think like, oh, I've got to go buy 5 acres if I want to farm. But like, I think there's a very viable or like important thing to say that like you can be a part-time farmer and you could actually stay in your residential location, depending upon like if you have enough space and enough sunlight and all that, or not, or not a lot of shade trees, and grow high value crops and like make a solid amount of money.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I know I'm looking at that just from like a business perspective, but like, I mean, Curtis Stone did it. Obviously I know he was renting different plots and stuff, but I think that I don't know, I think there's something to say for like small scale part-time farming, like and just having other income streams. And then again, you've got the land base. Obviously, I mean, it's not ideal. You can water with your municipal source, and then cold storage and a small high tunnel. I don't know. I just feel like when you think about that, you're like, okay, that feels attainable versus I've got to go buy 5 acres and like start absolutely nothing and drill a well and spend tens of thousands, $100,000 to launch a farm.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's definitely doable in the small scale like that in the part-time. I think the biggest thing is that would make that a success or a failure is the knowledge and efficiency and the systems that someone puts in place. And that's where like Curtis Stone has done such a good job showing how you can do that really efficiently in a backyard garden. But yeah, it's funny, like I'll talk to some, on the highest end, you have folks like Ray Tyler and Connor Crickmore, Jean Martin, that have demonstrated, Elliot Coleman, of course, like that have demonstrated you can do crazy amounts of production on a small acreage. And they're doing $100,000 to $200,000 to $300,000 on like an acre or less.
No, it's crazy.
Which is just amazing. And but then it was funny, like as we were demonstrating that, working towards that at the ranch, and we would have farmer trainings, and I would tell someone like, hey, we're doing 200K on 3 acres, and they're like, that's crazy. Like we could barely feed our family on 3 acres. I'm like, wait, what is that? Like, kind of, what do you mean? So, and they were doing corn and stuff, which I'm probably sure took like an acre of that or something. And they're probably growing for like more extended family.
Yeah.
But it's funny, the reference point of like, yeah, you could have a huge garden and harvest a fraction out of what someone with the right systems and efficiencies could harvest out of a fraction of that space. And so that's a big indicator if someone's going to have success doing that part-time. Is like they've got to be able to, just go to the backyard 30 minutes a day, and I'm bringing in another $1,000 a month. But like that's most of your mortgage, depending on where you live. And so I think that could be a great solution, and it's also a great way to start building the local food system back up is having that part-time kind of effort. But it's got to take the right person with the right systems and efficiencies in place for sure.
Yeah, dude, definitely, man. Yeah, the seed starting schedules, the transplanting, the weeding if you're not growing in landscape fabric, and then obviously your wash pack, having that efficient and down. But yeah, I mean, you hear 100% spot on. But yeah, like I mean, and too, like you're saying, it's like, well, if you grow your backyard full of corn, I mean, you're not, you're not gonna really make any money. That crop's gonna be in the ground for a while.
Yep. Well,
Um,
and that too is such a good point. Like crop selection. If you're starting off, what kind of things don't you need a wash and pack for? Like, and or if you do head lettuce versus baby, cut and come again lettuce.
yep.
And at the farm that I was managing, we never grew sweet corn, okra. I grew squash one year, and then or watermelons, because they took up so much space. And also, like, every truck farmer, parked on the side of the road had those things at really cheap prices, and they may not even been growing them. They may go into an auction and just buying them super cheap. And so I was like, I'm not even gonna compete on those things. I'll do stuff that those guys don't have, or things that make more money per square foot of garden space. And really that's what it takes, is like that level of planning and figuring out what crop makes how much money per acre and what's the cost of growing it, and then figuring out what has the best return on investment.
Yeah, and so tell me a little bit about, because I know you do some flower stuff too. So tell me about, like, and I've just heard this because I don't grow flowers. I really don't have an interest in it. It's just not something that's ever kind of, interested my heart and my passions. But I heard it's like, in regards to profitability, it's up there. It surpasses, for example, grown head lettuce or spring mix.
Yeah.
Just fill me in on that, because I'm asking you. I don't know. I've just heard that.
Yeah, it definitely can. Cut flowers, I would say, are harder than vegetables. One, because there's a lot more plant families. So like if you divide all your vegetables into by family, or by by family, most of them fall into like 3 or 4 categories. Like Solanaceae is like all the fruiting stuff, and but for flowers, like there's hundreds of different species from dozens and dozens of different families, and they all grow differently, have different growth habits. Most vegetables you can just throw in some soil. You can cover them or not, they're going to germinate at 70 degrees. Flowers, some of those flowers need light to germinate, some don't need. Some you have to scratch the seed on sandpaper. Like, it's so much more knowledge around like what each type of plant needs than I think vegetable farming. And then being able to, one, you have a super perishable product. And so like if you don't sell those flowers, there's no putting them in the cooler for another week, they're just gone. They can blow over really easily. Pest damage, you got one bug bite, like you can't sell that flower. Whereas you could still take some nibbles on some lettuce to the farmer's market, but
For sure, yeah.
you couldn't sell dahlias with bites out of them to a florist. So that's one component. And then climate is a big issue, so it definitely has its challenges. There's definitely been a huge renaissance in flowers in recent years, which has been awesome. Floret Farm has been a big part of that, getting people excited about growing flowers again. And there's a huge market potential, because gosh, I mean, I think it's something like 90% of the flowers that are in the US are imported from out of country. A big part of that was like the war on drugs. We incentivized Colombian growers to switch from coca to growing flowers, to try and fight the cocaine epidemics of the 90s, and it crashed the US flower market.
Wow.
So a lot of that is rebuilding the whole flower market. And then a lot of that, with that crash, came a lot of lost knowledge. So one of the flowers I really love and will continue to try and scale is our tulips. And to learn how to do that process, like I found like documents and handouts like in Dutch, and use Google Translate to try and figure out what I needed to do, because there wasn't any point of reference. There wasn't anyone I could really turn to and ask how to do that. So, I mean, that does present a huge challenge, but the market is there. Like direct consumer is huge. A lot of vegetable farmers are finding that they can take cut flowers to the farmer's market and it's increasing their vegetable sales, which is great. And there's some standard ones, you know, zinnias, celosia, basil, you can mix into those bouquets, and sunflowers. And if you did those for you've got great bouquets you can take to market. You know, and so the return per acre is super high on flowers, but the knowledge you need and the labor can also be pretty high to cut all those individual blooms. To, you know, everything has to immediately go in a cooler. You got to cut it early in the morning. And then figuring out how to sell and price them too is also, you know, taking a learning curve. And the direct consumer market's there. And I think the US wholesale and florist market is there too. Though that's something I'm trying to figure out, is like, how do I, if I want to scale my flower growing, how do I sell to Kroger? How do I sell to Walmart? How do I sell to the dozen florists I have in Conway? And where currently are they getting their flowers from? And can I beat those prices? Or if I can't beat the price, give enough reason why our value is the way that it is. So yeah, huge return per square foot and or per acre, but definitely some challenges on both the growing and the finding your market side.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's like a vegetable grower starting a mushroom enterprise. It's like it's its own separate, like there's just a learning curve. Like I'd have no clue where to start with flowers. And I feel like that can be a for a lot of people, and I've done it myself, of like, I want to do it all. I want to grow, you know, 30 different things. And it's like, gosh, that sounds fun. But at the same time, it's like, I need to stay focused. But yeah, with flowers, man, I would I would have no clue where to start. Cause I thought about adding mushrooms, but it's like, gosh, the infrastructure, you know, the infrastructure is pretty pricey and there's just a massive learning curve. And it's like, no, I just need to stay focused on what I'm doing and making my systems better, my transplants, my scheduling, focusing on fertility, just like all those things. Instead of adding something else, I need to just say ultra focused on what I'm already doing.
There's like I think that's a great approach, especially at the beginning, that like you're not, and I struggle with this because I want to do 50 different directions at the same time. I'm so bad at that. Very ADD when it comes to making a plan. But I'm like trying to force myself, like I focus on the things when I'm just starting out and then I can broaden later. And that's definitely one of the pitfalls. There was a farmer I'd consulted that was trying to do everything and they thought it was like synergistic. But it was actually just making like every enterprise fail. I think you can get to a point where you can find the synergies. Like with the cut flowers, I wound up figuring out a crop rotation that worked with our cut flowers and our vegetables, to where we were overwintering some of our tunnels in cut flowers. And then we had cut flowers super early, months before everybody else. And that worked out really well. But it didn't have us like running in two different directions. It was strategic in that it kept everyone busy throughout the winter, kept all the tunnels filled throughout the winter. And so that just comes with time, of like figuring out which enterprises like stack and synergize well and which ones are like conflicting, you know, having you do really time intensive things at the same point in the season would be, you know, one of those things. Like if you're doing chickens and cut flowers and both of those are like, you know, peak need most of your time in the middle of the summer, you know, that would be a conflicting enterprise.
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, and just I feel like starting out, there's so much like reinvesting I need to do into this set business. But it's like, yeah, maybe 5, 10 years down the line, you got maybe one of your kids is to the point where like, hey, I want to take this on. It's like, yeah, you know, and they have vision for another enterprise. It's like, let's do it. Let's put the capital to launch it. But yeah, I'm totally with you, man. Well, I got one last question as we start to wrap up. It's maybe a little bit more personal, so just share as you want. But fill me in a little bit on, you know, how has your Christian faith impacted like what you do today with Mindful Farmer.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. It's funny. I'm gonna back up just real fast, and
Yeah.
then I can't answer any question directly. I'm sorry. um, I love ecology, and for me, like being outside in nature was where I felt like I met God for the first time
Yeah.
in a real intimate way, even though I had been in church growing up. Uh, but I struggled with like some of the ways that I, saw God in ecology. It felt like a lot of the approach in the church growing up, the American church, is very kind of like anti-environment in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so all even through college, it felt like I was too hippie for my Christian friends and too Christian for my hippie friends. And it felt kind of in between worlds. And now as an adult, I'm finding more people that are of that same line of thinking of like, stewarding creation well is an act of worship.
Yeah.
And, weeding a field is prayer, and so, yeah, I think that that approach to sustainable agriculture is like my wife and I, like we talk about, like that's our family's mission. We're a family on mission, and this is how we're doing kingdom work is what we call it. Whenever Jesus prayed like on earth as it is in heaven, we want on earth as it is in heaven like now. We want to make earth look more like heaven a little bit every day, and believe that sustainable ag is the way that we're doing that. And so, like I said, like earlier in our talk, the communities thrive when they have this local system and when the local food system is thriving. And so you have a more healthy environment, you have people that are healthier physically, you have people that are more connected through the person they're getting their food from, and they can have a tighter community. And when they have tighter community, the crime rate goes down. Like all these things are so connected with making earth look more like heaven a little every day. And so, yeah, as we follow Jesus, us following Jesus looks like stewarding creation well and helping others do that. And so, I think we still kind of walk a line between the hippie and the Christian community and stuff, and being an organic ag. Like I walk with people in all circles of life. And I, that they know that's what motivates me. That's what gets me up in the morning is, worshiping God through stewarding well. And for us, that looks like organic farming. And so, yeah, that's really what's driving us, and what's driving us to do Mindful Farmer and Mindful Kitchen for my wife. And she kind of has the same approach of like, if people's bodies are healthy, like, the spiritual and the physical are very much connected. And if your physical life is crap, your spiritual life is probably going to be crap too. And so wanting people to eat healthy and be as physically healthy as they are spiritually healthy, those things are very much connected. And so that's what we're pursuing.
No, you put up beautifully well, man, because I relate with that a lot, and I think that's what drew me so much too. As a Christian, as a believer, I felt that same similar draw and connection, and I think there's just something powerful about partnering with God in the midst of what He's created and the way He's designed soil to work. Like there's some really powerful things, which I mean you see in Scripture. There's so many agricultural parallels in Scripture.
Oh yeah.
And but I'm with you, and I think the beauty of it is the mission of the church is not just in between those four walls. Like I get to go live out my mission through my work, through my business, and I think that's the beauty of it. But I'm with you on like the oh, I'm too hippie for my Christian friends, but I'm too Christian for my hippie friend, that thing. But like that's the beauty of it, I think too, is like God's placed us specifically within that middle ground to fight for His kingdom. And and so anyways, I that was one of the questions I did have that I wanted to ask you, so I really appreciate you sharing. So
yeah, of course. Yeah, I think that middle ground, like what you just said about us being in the middle ground for a reason. It's like I think the Christian church could benefit so much by seeing God in creation more, They're thinking that just has to happen, like you said, in those four walls. And then for, there's some amazing people that are, fighting for a better world. That it's like, could just be, they're missing a big component if they don't see that this world is for a reason, And so, yeah, I think it's really important to be in that middle ground and show people like, creation is this beautiful thing because there's someone who loves you and made it. And creation is important because there's someone who loves you and made it and doesn't want you to just only think about heaven and not care about the here and now,
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I always love, like, I've always been so drawn to Joel Salatin because he talks so much about that, of just the stewardship aspect and the mission that they're living out. Even now, it's like, man, Joel could be just chilling, but he's choosing not to. He's choosing to invest in the next generation, and he's doing that with incredible intention. It's not just like, hey, we're gonna create some more farmers. It's like, no, there's the reason they're called stewards when they get there, because they're ingraining these things into the next generation through what they're doing. And so anyways, I feel like I could have an hour-long talk about this, but really just appreciate you coming on, Sean. And yeah, man, really enjoyed having you on the podcast and just getting to learn from you. And I know the listeners will feel the same. So just want to say thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.